In this video, I'll be detailing a complete program for maximizing your strength as a martial artist and fighter. You can implement this program yourself, even if you're a complete beginner, to see rapid progress. And the program is designed to not interfere with your martial arts, but instead complement it, leading to overall greater performance on the mats. The three things I'll be covering in this video are: number one, the exercise that we'll be using to take your strength to the next level; number two, one of the most reliable progression systems for steady strength gains; and number three, I'm going to go over how to combine and program everything from set and rep ranges to rest times and deload weeks in order to avoid plateaus, but also to ensure that the program is sustainable so you can keep on building strength in the long run. All of this to support a higher level of performance for the ultimate fighter. Let's begin. By the way, if you want to take your pulling power and calisthenics performance to the next level, join our free community Pulling Champions for exclusive content, accountability and companionship. Click the top link in the description down below and I'll see you on the inside. Cheers. Alright, let's get into the full strength training program for martial artists. Now, first and foremost, I want to preface this video by saying that strength training is not a substitute for martial arts training in any capacity. But I do believe that strength training absolutely can complement your martial arts. You see, with proper strength training, you'll have a much greater foundation for expressing your martial arts ability, especially when going up against bigger and stronger opponents who may or may not be taking steroids, right? And if you're like me, this is what we've always dreamt of being able to do, being the little guy that can fight against a behemoth of a man, right? Grapple against him and stand your ground. It's the David versus Goliath story, right? Which I find to be so incredibly fascinating. Additionally, a solid strength foundation is often useful to build other attributes such as power and explosivity. Now, before we jump right into the program, I want to sort of discuss this point of what makes a good martial artist. Because if thinking about the ultimate fighter, what attributes would he actually have? First and foremost, if we're looking at a grappler, right, so a jiu-jitsu athlete, a judoka or a wrestler, what would they want to have? Well, a grappler would probably want to have solid pulling strength, so they could perform effective arm drags, Russian ties, collar ties and similar, right, where they're pulling the opponent towards them or they're pulling their opponent down, right? They would also probably want to have solid pushing strength so that they could be effective with guard retention, keep people away from them, with mount escapes, for example, so push someone off of them, and similar, right? And obviously, with, for example, something like a mount escape, you want to have great technique, right? But if that is the case, strength is never a weakness, right? I mean, like, if you have a proper technique foundation, layering that with extra strength really just opens up the pathway to defend yourself or to fend for yourself against bigger and more dangerous opponents, right? Also, the grappler would want strong and explosive legs for the purpose of shooting for takedowns, right? The double or single leg, for example, or for standing their ground against incoming takedowns, right? For absorbing a bit of power. But, very important point here, the power should not come at the cost of bulky and immobile legs. If they have huge legs that can generate lots of power, but they can't stay in the fight for a significant amount of time, I would say it's ineffective and against the entire point. So they cannot be bulky and immobile legs that you struggle to sort of throw around and move around yourself. Other factors worth keeping in mind for the grappler include the following: hip flexibility for guard retention and grip strength, especially if you're doing BJJ or judo with a gi, so where you're wearing the actual kimono, the suit thing, where you have the lapels or something to grip onto, right? Then grip strength is especially important. So this gives us the following summary, right? Like, for the ultimate grappler, you'd want to have some pulling strength, you'd want to have some pushing strength, you'd want to have some leg strength, and you'd also want to have some hip flexibility and grip strength. Fair enough, like, all of these attributes play nicely along with grappling. Then when looking at a striker, so someone doing boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, or even Taekwondo, for example, or a striker, the ultimate striker, would want to have rotational pushing strength in addition to pushing strength for the purpose of being able to throw effective hooks, uppercuts and elbows, right? You'd also want to be able to do straights and jabs effectively, but the aspect of rotational punches is also quite important to keep in mind. If all you're doing is boxing, that's the only martial arts you're sort of going for, you're not really concerned with having a whole MMA game, but it's like striking to the max, then obviously being able to have good rotational punches would be something to look into. You'd also want to have good pulling strength. Why? Well, so they could pull back punches quickly and settle for more strikes, right? If you're doing a barrage of strikes because you've gotten your enemy into the corner, right, you'd want to be able to pull those punches back effectively, both for actually getting back to your guard if you're in a more just casual setting during the fight. It's never really casual in the middle of the fight, but when you're like have a bit more of a relaxed period, and when you're in the barrage of like you're just absolutely striking down your opponent, you want to have effective pulling strength, and so you can pull back quickly and ready up for the next punch. Hopefully that makes sense. Also, you want to have strong and stable legs. Why stable legs? Well, that would be for the purpose of generating proper power for the punches, right? Because we generate power in our lower body, right? Because this is the first place, this first point of contact with the ground. And if you have a solid and stable lower body, you'll be able to generate proper punches in your upper body. Also, you'd want to have strong and explosive legs for the purpose of delivering high impact kicks, right? And you'd also want to have precise and coordinated legs, but also crucially feet, for the purpose of having swift and effective footwork, setting up for good combinations and punches, being in the place you need to be to create opportunities in a fight. But, yet again, power should not come at the cost of bulky legs that quickly tire out. Then it defeats the purpose. And other factors worth keeping in mind for the ultimate striker include hip flexibility, so they could perform high head kicks, and also having a strong neck and spine, so they could be able to withstand high impact blows. So, with all of these things, the summary we sort of have for the ultimate striker would be that they have push strength, specifically this aspect of rotational pushing strength as well. They have pulling strength, they have strong and explosive legs, specifically a stable lower body so they can actually throw punches from their upper body effectively, but also strong and explosive legs for high impact kicks, and this aspect of coordinated legs and specifically feet, precise feet, so you have swift and effective footwork so you can set up for good opportunities is important. So, when looking into creating a program for this, our approach will be as follows. We want to focus on pulling strength, pushing strength, and leg strength, but it is worth considering that you have multiple bonuses and sort of functional categories, such as grip strength, core strength, hip and leg flexibility, as well as a strong neck and spine. That would be nice to focus on as well, depending on what martial arts you do, what you feel is a lagging area, and where you sort of want to get to in your journey, right? So if you're interested in any of these topics, I have a lot of interest for lots of these, then I'll gladly make videos about those separately, so let me know in the comments down below. But for the overall program, let's dive right in. First and foremost, I'm thinking an effective way of setting this up would be to have a 3-day split. This will lead to a minimal strength program that leaves lots of time for martial arts training and other types of training, whether that be core work, grip strength, flexibility work, bulletproofing, you name it. So, in a weekly structure, it might look like this, having a session on Monday, a session on Wednesday, and a session on Friday, and based on what we'll set up, each session will last from 45 minutes to an hour 15, more or less. Depends a bit how much volume you like to have in your sessions, how much you tailor it yourself, and tweak things up, but this is sort of the base idea I have in mind. So, what we want to do is that per movement category, so for push and for pull and for legs, we want to have one primary exercise. And in addition to this, we can add in 2 sort of supplementary exercises, so either one secondary, one that's sort of like next in line, and one tertiary, or just 2 accessories that are just not as important as the primary, but they're there to fill in some gaps, to add some specificity, to work on some different movement patterns and get some different stimulus. Now, when we're looking at a progression system for how to actually progress and get stronger, because that's the goal with a strength training program, we have 2 sort of options. First is the Russian method, and second is a linear progression system. The Russian method is this sort of system where you do large increases in weight, but you do them more rarely, right? This is sort of the staircase. So you might stick to a particular load, a particular weight, for 2 to 3 months before you do a larger weight increase. Whereas the linear progression, you might, for example, add 1 kilo each week, and that's just a straight line. You just keep on adding, slowly but surely. So, let's get into exercise selection. For the pushing side of things, I'd recommend the primary movement be either the overhead press or a different type of bench press variation. So something that's horizontal as opposed to vertical in nature. And then for your secondary or tertiary option, you could have the inverse. So if you do the overhead press as your main movement, as your primary movement, then you could have a secondary option be just a bench press variation, so something horizontal, or vice versa. You also, instead of having barbell bench presses, you have dumbbell bench presses, and specifically like incline dumbbell bench press at different varying angles. You have dips, specifically weighted dips when you get good at just regular dips. And then especially for boxers, it might be interesting to look at these exercises, that being the rotational cable punch outs for that rotational power, right? Specifically getting your hooks good and like solid with energy, and the landmine press. So a bit more of perhaps sort of uppercut, like an uppercut vibe to it. An example might be, for example, to have your overhead press be your primary movement on the pushing side, your dips be a secondary movement, and rotational cable punch out as a tertiary movement. For the pulling exercises, what I'm generally speaking recommending is that the primary movement of yours is the weighted pull-up or the weighted chin-up on the pulling side of things. Sort of a bit up to personal preference. If you have some calisthenic skill goals for the future, you might want to go for one over the other. There might be a few choices that impact it, such as if you have a very weak, you feel like your forearms are quite weak and your lats are not as well developed as, for example, your biceps, it might be then a better choice to go for the weighted pull-ups and work more on those attributes, but it's largely up to you. Or entirely up to you. It just hinges on a few different things. And what I'd recommend though is that if you're going to do weighted pull-ups, I'd recommend that you start off with being able to do some 10 plus bodyweight pull-ups before you're starting the weight. If you're not able to do 10 plus yet, you can start at around 6 to 8 solid bodyweight reps, but I'd recommend, and what I would do personally if I was in the position of not being able to do 10 plus reps, is get to that point. Increase the bodyweight reps first, and then get into the weighted game. And then for secondary and tertiary movements, you either have the inverted row, just like bodyweight rows, you have barbell rows, different sort of rowing variations, you have the perfect pull-up to really work on retraction, which is really the name of the game when it comes to pulling, and then one arm hangs, or even bilateral hangs, like hanging with two arms or hanging with extra weight, working on your grip, working on your tendons, right? And then you can work on curls, so you can have, whether that be bicep curls for your biceps brachii, your brachioradialis, or your brachialis, or whether it be wrist curls, so working on your forearms a bit more. For example, what you can choose to do is do weighted pull-ups as your primary exercise, rows, whether that be bodyweight or barbell, for your secondary, and the perfect pull-up as your tertiary exercise. And by the way, check out this video right here, like in the cards somewhere on screen right now, if you want to learn more about different pulling accessories. So, last but not least, legs. Here there are lots of different options. I tend to go for the barbell back squat as a primary movement, but if you're not able to do that for some reason, there are lots of good ones to pick from this list, right? You have the front squat, you have leg press, you have RDLs, you have weighted lunges, for example, a Bulgarian split squat, right, or just a different type of split squat in that sense. You have plyometrics for explosivity, might be nice, Nordic curls for really targeting the hamstrings, lots of good stuff to choose from. One example, barbell back squat for the primary exercise, RDLs for your secondary, and plyometrics for your tertiary movement. There you go. So, let's start to tie all of these things together. First and foremost, the order of operations. What are we going to do first, and when, why, where, for what reason? First, I'd say that in the weekly program, you want to have your main pushing session before you have your main pulling session. And this is for the simple reason that when you're pushing, you're using your lats for a base of support, right? And your lats are what you tire when you do your pulling. So if you were to have pulling on Monday and you get really tired, then you get to Wednesday and you're still quite fatigued in your lats, your base of support for your overhead pressing, for example, your lats would be tired. So it wouldn't be the best of conditions to train, right? So because of this, we just want to do our pushing before our pulling. So we have a fresh base of support, that being our lats, before we tire them out on the pulling session. Then next up, in a particular training day, you want to do your strength work before you do your martial arts work. So either an hour or so before the actual martial arts session, or you'd want to have your strength training in the morning and then martial arts in the afternoon or evening, for example. And in your particular strength workout, what you want to do is you want to start with your primary movement, then do a secondary movement, and then a tertiary movement. And each and every workout, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, each workout those days, we're going to have some push, some pull, and some legs training. So it's going to be a full body day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but with different focuses, right? So this is an example of what a program might look like and what this program looks like, right? You start off on Monday, the primary movement is pushing, then you have a secondary pulling movement and a tertiary leg movement. For Wednesdays, you have primary legs, secondary push, tertiary pull, and Friday, the primary movement is pull, then you have a secondary movement being legs, and tertiary is push. And this way, in the course of a week, you do your primary push, primary, secondary, and tertiary push, as well as pull and legs, right? So you cover all bases within a week. Now, next up, for a warm-up, I'd recommend doing a 5, 6, 7 minute warm-up before each strength session. This is really just for the purpose of elevating your heart rate, right? So do some jumping jacks, bodyweight squats, jogging in place, some high rep calisthenics, whatever gets you nice and warm, gets you breaking a bit of a sweat, elevates your heart rate a little bit, gets you a bit out of breath. You're good, you're sorted, you're ready for your workout once you achieve those little targets. Now, when it comes to the number of sets and reps, I'd say this, like for the primary movements, an average of performing roughly 4 sets per primary movement per session is a good way to go. So what that means is that if you're doing, for example, the Russian method, because an average of 4, what does that really mean? Well, if you're doing the Russian method and you're familiar with this, it uses 3 to 5 sets for 3 to 5 reps, right? So what you want to do with the Russian method is that you start off with 3 sets of 3 reps. So you go in and you have 3 by 3, right? 3, 3, 3, 3 reps, 3 reps, 3 reps with rest in between. The next week, when you have your primary session again, right? Like next Friday, for example, when you're going to have your next primary pulling session, you're going to go in and you're going to do 4 sets of 3 reps. So 3, 3, 3, 3. The next week after that, you'll get in and you'll do 5 sets of 3 reps. The next week after that, you'll go back to 3 sets, but now 4 reps. So you do 4 reps, rest, 4 reps, rest, 4 reps. The week after that, you go to 4 sets of 4. Week after that, 5 sets of 4. So 4 reps, you rest, 4 reps, you rest, 4 reps, you rest, 4 reps, you rest, 4 reps. And then you've done 5 sets of 4 reps, right? The session after that, you go back down to 3 sets now of 5 reps. The week after that, you go to 4 sets of 5 reps, and the week after that, you get to 5 sets of 5 reps. When you've reached 5 by 5, the next week after that again, you go back to 3 by 3, so 3 sets of 3 reps, but now with a significantly greater load. So you can either add on 7.5 kilo or maybe as much as 10 kilo. Obviously, the jumps will vary as you go on, like they will become smaller and smaller eventually, but you can squeeze out quite a bit of performance from this, and I personally love the Russian method myself. So the alternative would be that you do linear progression, 4 sets each when you do a primary movement, 4 sets of some 4 to 5 reps. Now, after you've done your primary movement for a particular, like let's say we're in on Friday, you've done your 4 sets, or on an average, you've done your average of 4 sets of the weighted pull-up, then you move on to your secondary movement. And here we sort of follow this reverse pyramid structure. So you do fewer reps, but you do fewer sets, but you do more reps per set, right? So instead of doing some 3 to 5 reps, we now do 5 to 8, right? Slow and controlled, focus on technique. And for your tertiary movement, after you've done your secondary, you just do 2 sets of 6 to 10 reps. Now, for those of you that prefer higher volume, and you feel like this is way too little volume doing 4, 3, 2 in terms of sets, you could do 5 sets of primary, 4 sets of secondary, 3 sets of tertiary, or alternatively to this, you can just increase volume for some of the secondary tertiary movements just as you please. If you feel there should be more volume of the tertiary movement or secondary movement on a particular day for a particular reason, do that at your own peril. By the way, check out this video right here if you want to learn more about the Russian method. I go into a bit of greater detail. Might be nice to get it from a different angle. Now, when we look at prioritization, this is something that's quite important in this program, right? The primary movement is primary for a reason, right? It's the one we want to progress with at the fastest rate and the most significantly, right? You see, the only thing that sort of matters from week to week is that we progress with the primary movement. That's really all that matters. The secondary and tertiary movement, sure, we still want to progress with it, but we don't want to have or we don't necessarily need a specific progression system. The way I'd recommend going about it is that you focus on technique, you do slow and controlled reps, and you add a few kilos sporadically when it feels right and you're hitting the end of the rep range. So, an example, if you have a secondary movement you're performing, for example, rows in the case of the pulling scenario, right? If you're doing 3 sets of 8, sort of top and end of the range for the reps, 3 sets of 8 or even 9 or 10 reps, right? And it's moving with ease, strict form, it's good control on the way up and down. You can add 1 to 2 kilos and sort of see how many reps you can crank out then. Similarly with the tertiary movement, if you can do 2 sets of 10 reps or 11 or even 12, it's moving with ease, you have great control, right, great form, you can add 1 to 2 kilos. You could even see, like, if you want to push it far, like if you're getting to 12 or even 13 as much as this, you might be wanting to add not just 2 kilos, but maybe 3, 4, 5 kilos, right? Depends what weight you have accessible and depends how far you've taken it, how comfortable you feel with it. But you can do these types of jumps a bit more illy-nilly, like when you feel like it, when it makes sense for you to do it. But it's not a concrete progression system you necessarily need to follow, in the sense that you know that on this day, on this particular time, you'll be rocking this number of reps for this much weight, etc. Now, another important thing to consider is rest time, and that is that for the primary exercise that you're doing, I'd recommend doing minimum 3 minutes between sets. You could do as much as 5 or even 6 minutes, but minimum 3. And the key here is really that you want to be physically and mentally ready for your next set. That's it. If that means 3 minutes, fine. If that means 5, also fine. If it means 7 in some cases, also fine. But if you wait too long, that's not going to be very effective either, right? So, for your secondary movements, I'd recommend having 2 to 4 minutes between sets. 3 tends to be a sweet spot. And then a tertiary exercise, if it truly is a tertiary exercise, in the sense that it's a lighter one, like significant, like from primary to secondary, there's a lighter intensity. From secondary to tertiary, there's also like a significant lesser intensity with the exercise. You can do 1 to 3 minutes or some 2 minutes ish. If you have 2 secondary exercises, you probably would want a bit more rest on this front. So this brings us to the complete program. So you start off Monday, 4 sets of pushing, 3 sets of pulling, and 2 sets of legs. On the Wednesday, you do 4 sets of legs, 3 sets of push and 2 sets of pull. And for your Friday, that being your big pull session, you have 4 sets of pull, 3 sets of legs, and 2 sets of push. So then you see, like with this format, Monday is like the pushing day, Wednesday is the leg day, and Friday is the pull day. But still, on each day, you do a bit of work for both for push, for pull, and for legs. So with the exercises I chose earlier on, the examples, this is what the complete program would look like. On Monday, 4 sets of overhead press, followed by 3 sets of rowing, followed by 2 sets of plyometrics. On Wednesday, you do 4 sets of barbell back squats, then 3 sets of weighted dips, 2 sets of perfect pull-ups. On Friday, you start off with 4 sets of weighted pull-ups, then 3 sets of RDLs, and then 2 sets of cable rotations for that rotational hook power. And also, something I wanted to cover in this video is that I often get questions like, can I combine this program with this or that or something else? So I wanted to tackle a few of these right now. And that is that if you want to tackle strength training at the same time as doing skill training, I'd recommend doing skill training before you do strength training, right? If you want to layer other things on top of your strength training program. And this is because you want to be fresh for skill work, so you can teach your body optimal technique. If you do skill training after your strength training, when you might be quite tired, well, you should be quite tired, you won't be able to teach your body the optimal technique because you won't be able to execute the optimal technique because you're fatigued, right? And so an example of this would be like one-arm pull-up training and weighted pull-ups. If you've drained yourself on the weighted pull-ups and then later on try to do any one-arm pull-up work of any significance at your current sort of ability level, that will be quite horrendous. It won't be optimal by any means. Now, if you want to learn more about this, check out this video to combine skills and strength training in the cards right here, right now. And for another example, if you want to combine strength training with endurance training, I'd recommend doing endurance training after you do your strength training, for the simple reason that the endurance training has a potential to lead to junk volume, hindering max strength gains, and it tires you out. By the time you get to your strength lift, you don't have the same capacity for output as you did earlier on. Just something to keep in mind. So yeah, check out this video right here if you want to combine endurance and strength training into a larger program, somewhere in the cards. Now, last but not least, I think it's nice to manage expectations. Last, but maybe not least, we'll see. But it's nice to manage expectations for progress, because often people will start a program and something goes a bit wrong and it hinders progress entirely because they just leave the program altogether, right? So, first and foremost, if you're getting stuck, you might have too much junk volume in your program. That's usually the case for lots of situations, right? Or at least, in a significant amount of cases it is. So what you want to do, and what we're doing with this program, is that we prioritize your main push, main pull, and main leg lifts above all else. And then we have lighter secondary and tertiary movements as accessories. But if you feel like you're managing volume well, this is important to keep in mind. If you feel like you don't have too much volume in your training overall, each week, then you might be getting too little rest or too sparse deload weeks each season. This is an incredibly important point where more or less once a month or once every 2 months, you want to take a week where you do less training or no training at all. Why? To allow your body to recover and take in the recent changes, to react to the recent stimulus and make you go on with more progress in the future. So that's something I really recommend. And you might say, Jacob, I don't know how often to deload. Well, keep it simple. If you have really high energy level output, right, like you're doing lots of training, you have really intense training, you're not the best when it comes to your recovery, your sleeping, and when it comes to your diet, you're not really eating the best of foods, you're not getting too many vitamins and minerals, you're not doing any supplements in terms of like if you need some vitamins or that type of thing, then maybe and probably you should deload a bit more often. But if your sleep is dialed in, your nutrition is dialed in, you're training hard, yes, but you're not like you're training at a moderate sort of number of hours per week, and the intensity isn't very, like, it's high, it can be high, but it's not incredibly high to the point where you're drained. If those things collide, then you can do a deload week as rarely as every 2 months ish. Then another point that's important to note down is this of patience and consistency, right? With anything, if you want to be good at martial arts, at climbing, at chess, whatever have you, you want to be in it for a long time. Whenever you see a phenomenal athlete, it's never the result of having just been in the gym for 24 hours straight and then they've come out on the other side and now they're phenomenal. It's always just like lots of work or like, consistent work over a long period of time, right? And that's like, okay, fair enough, Jacob, we know this, okay. But we want to be in it for a long game. We want to be in it for the long game. Yeah, that's what it is. And what does that actually mean in practice? Well, in my head, it means sort of two things, right? First and foremost, you don't want to rush into an injury, right? And what does that mean? Well, in practice, it means that you want to pace yourself. You want to avoid junk volume, right? And you want to just have a bit of patience. You want to make sure that you're going at it, sure you're doing your stuff, but you want to pace yourself. You can't do too much. Like, if you're doing too much volume, you're training all of the time, you're getting too little rest, too little sleep, you'll get an injury, you'll burn out, burn out in the sense where you'll actually burn out in terms of like you'll be fatigued, you overtrained in the medical sense, and you can't really output what you're supposed to output or what you're usually outputting. And the other issue is that, the other thing you want to make sure you're doing is that you don't fall off the bandwagon, right? Like, you want to make sure that you have consistency, that you put in the work. And the way I like to think about these is that you want to have consistency in the sake that you're doing enough to the point where you can actually stimulate growth over time. But at the same time, you want to make sure you have some patience and you pace yourself. You don't do too much and rest too little, and like you just absolutely keep running yourself into the ground to the point where you get an injury. If you can stay between these two levels, success will find you, or rather, you will find success. And yeah, this quote I feel like is just really fitting for this video. And it goes, be brave, take risks. Nothing can substitute experience. And with that, it's just really wise if you guys get out there and if you try this program or another I've got on my channel or just something completely different. The key to like getting anywhere with this is starting something and then getting some experience, getting some results, getting some data on what works for you, what doesn't, what does your body sort of respond well to, what doesn't it respond well to, and then you can make changes. But if you don't actually gain experience, right, nothing can substitute experience. If you don't actually have that to go off of, you have no data, no results to actually change, right? So getting started is the most important thing. Be brave, take risks. Now, with that said, don't forget to join the free community, top link in the description down below. And also, if you want to join free one-on-one coaching directly with me, one-on-one, there's a second link in the description down below for exactly that purpose. So, with that said, keep on training, train what you love, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.